to another episode of Inspire Wealth. My name is Mallory Meehan, aka Prof M, and I am joined by with Aaron Adams with Alpine Capital. Aaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited for you to kind of give us more details into what your company does, your background, and your experience within real estate. Because you've been doing this for a while, but you made a pretty strong pivot from what you were first doing. So why don't you kind of take us, introduce yourselves, and kind of tell us what brought you to this path?
Yeah, it's I always consider myself first and foremost a teacher. I feel like that's been my superpower. I know that we're both in the education space, and I was drawn to high school, and I started teaching high school back in 2000 in Southern California in the Riverside area. Taught Spanish and history, and loved teaching, and really loved coaching. I played volleyball in college, and coached volleyball at the high school, and turned a program around, and year two we lost in the semifinals of state. Year three we made it to the finals of state, and a couple years later I won two state championships. I spent 4 years coaching Division I volleyball at UC Riverside and then in Indiana. And concurrent to that kind of teaching coaching path, I started dabbling in real estate. And like many people, I stumbled on the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in 1998, and it just blew my mind. This whole idea of passive wealth was, because I was so programmed that when you wanted more money, you worked more. And so I, would bartend at Outback Steakhouse on the weekends, and picked up summer school, and picked up extra activities as a teacher to make more money. And that first year while teaching, I bought a duplex and convinced my wife to move into one side and rent out the other. And we had bought it for $100,000, and the rent from the other side was $750. And so it literally paid our principal, interest, tax, and insurance. And my wife's like, yeah, but this duplex is not where I want to live. It's like a C neighborhood. And I'm like, but we're free, and we're living there free. And she's like, I don't know if I like all these books and seminars you've been going to, because it's not the dream of a house that I want to live in. And you confront this kind of reality of how wealthy people behave with their money, and then how poor people behave. And when I made a 5-figure income, I had a 5-figure mindset about money. And there's beliefs that people have when they make less than 100,000 a year, that until you recognize what's limiting you, you don't break through to 100,000 or 500,000 or a million. And what's interesting is the first time I made $1 million was after the crash in 2009. After the whole real estate market collapsed. That was the year that I made $1 million, because we were selling properties to Singaporeans and Hong Kong investors. And and since then I've never gone backwards. And so I always talk about a 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure mindset, because for example, when my wife and I would get a tax refund check when I was poor, we'd get really excited, because that's a check. It came, even though it's your own money coming back to you, you're like, yeah, we can buy a couch. We just got $800, and so you're happy about a refund. Whereas wealthy people always wait until the year after to pay taxes, and they pay their bills and then pay the taxes. And poor people always let the money come out of their check every 2 weeks. And so once I realized that there's little green houses and red house plastic monopoly that most of the world plays, and then there's gold plated monopoly that the top 1%ers play, I really became obsessed with learning how they think about their money, how they think about retirement, how they think about taxes, how they think about income and business ownership. And that really kind of propelled me forward to, 3 years after I started that journey, I made almost $700,000 while still making 40 at the high school, and realized that it was time to kind of branch out on my own.
Yeah, and I think that that is such a common thought process is, you work in a W-2, you have somebody else who's, paying your paycheck. It's a very consistent, very stable thing. And, speaking of mindset, it's hard to venture outside of that uncertainty, where you're so used to getting paid biweekly, monthly, and then you go the entrepreneurial route, like what you're talking about. So how did you what were some of the lessons that you learned when you took that step from leaving your W-2 job into full real estate?
Yeah, I remember, the principal sat me down when I said, hey man, I just can't, I can't teach next year. I love these kids. I love coaching. And I felt like that was my superpower, was teaching. And I said, but I can't justify the time that I'm and the money that I'm losing. I just made 700,000 on the side. And he's like, well, Aaron, you're 1 year away from being vested in the pension. Like, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you have no clue, because if I took the 700,000 that I made last year and just paid free and clear for a couple of rentals, that would be more than the pension that I'll get 20 years from now.
Right.
Right. And we talk about security, and yeah, you get healthcare and you get a pension, but what are you trading for that?
Mhm.
And you fast forward 25 years later, I have over 200 properties that are free and clear. It's a six-figure pension every month, and so you realize that there's this myth that we tell ourselves about job security. There's this myth that we tell ourselves about safety. And it really comes down to assets and liabilities. If you work for somebody else, you are their asset. They make money off of you. And until you start working for yourself, you'll always be kind of held back. And I think another big thing is thinking of realizing how much an hour of your time is worth. So when I look at real estate projects right now, if I can't make $1,500 an hour for my time, then I'm not interested in doing that, because time is the one resource that we all have the same amount. And so that once you become jealous of your time, then you stop cutting your lawn, you stop doing your laundry, you start paying people for that, because then you realize that this resource of time is everything in terms of making money. And as you can raise your hourly wage from 200 to 500 to 1,000 to 1,500 an hour, then it just propels you forward in terms of the ability to accumulate wealth and to grow a business.
I love that. I think that's so well said. And something that, that mindset I think is the hardest piece to get over. And especially if you were in a generation where your parents worked for the same company, their whole life, and your grandparents did the same thing. And it's kind of ingrained in you in a very young age. And
Yeah.
then, you go to college and everybody says go to college so that you can get this prestigious job that's going to make you work 80 plus hours a week and pay you nothing. And you'll also graduate with student debt. And, so there's all of these kind of preconceived notions. And people, I think, miss the big picture. They miss what it is that, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And so are you trying to find your passion? Are you trying to live a more fulfilled life? What's the goal? So I'm curious as to what your goals were. Like, I know you had a passion for teaching, and I understand that passion, and I kind of have that same,
Yeah.
conundrum as well. But what did you kind of in your mind recreate as your goals and your why?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because my wife and I have 6 kids, and half of them are now out of the house, never to come back, hopefully. Right. And so that's, my dad I'm the oldest of 7, and my dad was a W-2 casino executive. So I grew up in Las Vegas, went to high school in New Jersey, and had this, my dad was a very traditional W-2 mindset. I have a brother that just made $500 million selling a supply chain management company in Amerisk. And so it's funny that how entrepreneurial these Adams kids ended up being, and talking about money. But it's funny, I'm the coach of the Idaho Falls High School volleyball program still.
Love it.
And every day, I'm 51. Every day I hard stop at 3:00. Like literally after this call today, we have team pictures, and we're the number 2 ranked team in the state this year.
Love
And
that.
but what's funny is, and when I circle back on coaching again, as my kids got older, realizing that my kids were going to leave the house, I set up a 501c3. I have a nonprofit for youth sports. And, this time around coaching, I built a 10,000 square foot gym with the nonprofit, and I built an Olympic swimming pool. And literally every day we have 40 kids in the gym and in the pool for free, swimming, playing basketball, playing volleyball. I run the volleyball club. We had 15 kids that we subsidized 80% of the cost to do club sports for. And there's a book that I read a couple of years ago by David Brooks, who's a columnist for the New York Times, a conservative columnist, and it's called The Second Mountain. And the premise of the book is that the first mountain in life is your money, your family, your health, your career, like your life. And then the second mountain, it's kind of an ethos of self. And then the second mountain is an ethos of living your life as a gift to others. And a lot of us get to kind of the top of the first mountain, like we're good with our money, our marriage is fine, the kids are doing good. And we realized that it's not as cool as we thought it would be when we first started ascending that first mountain. And then you realize there's this whole second mountain of legacy, of making a difference, of not trying to monetize everything. And so I realized that for me, that second mountain was teaching and making a difference one kid at a time. I have a girl that plays for my high school program that when I took over the program 3 years ago, I was like, man, what an athlete. And she's just in this little corner of Idaho and has always lived here. And I called my friend at Baylor University, which is one of the top 5 volleyball programs in the country. And he and I had coached together back in California 20 years ago. And I said, you need to see this kid. I'm going to send her out to your camp. And her parents are like, why would we go to Waco? Like, you can't even fly to Waco. And wasn't there like some crazy people in Waco? And what's Baylor? And I said, this guy was the coach of the year a couple of years ago. He's got 2 Olympians on his volleyball program. And they're like, yeah, but she's from Idaho. She's not going to be good enough. So last summer, she flew to Dallas and they drove to Waco and she MVP'd their camp and got a full ride. And that girl will always remember the impact that I had on her journey. And is it a big deal in anyone else's world? It's not. But when you tap into the difference of Second Mountain and creating a legacy and getting up every day, I turned down an 8-figure offer to buy half my company last year from a private equity firm because I really like the balance that I have at 51. I like that I hard stop every day at 3 and that I go coach. And I'm obsessed about this nonprofit. And when you find that balance and you find what your second mountain is, that becomes the financial and time translation of what your why really is. And so I'm obsessed with that concept.
I love that. And you know what? One of my questions was, what good books have you read that you would recommend others to read? So I'm guessing that The Second Mountain by David Brooks is one of them.
Yeah, let me, if I have a copy of it here.
Love that.
Yeah, I bought 10,000 copies of it. I've been giving them away to my clients.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
You give it away to every person who buys a house from you or buys property?
If we do a monthly training. It's free. We have it live stream if people like. We also do it live at either my offices in Indianapolis or in Idaho. And yeah, everybody that comes through. Gurus give away their own book. Teachers give away books that other people write that they like.
No, I absolutely understand. I'm right now, I'm on a Donald Miller kick. And so I have How to Grow Your Small Business.
Very cool.
Also read his marketing plan. And so right now that's kind of my world. But also, just a shout out because I am a tax nerd, tax-free wealth.
I love that.
And again, the going back to the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, definitely am a fan of all of those books. So that's my world.
Love
that. Okay, so now I want to kind of get into, tell me about your company and tell me about kind of how you built upon it and how your company is different from maybe what some other companies out there, and how you are set to help people hopefully understand that there is another option out there. There is more resources that you can build long-term wealth, and you don't have to work forever to do that.
Yeah. So, with a teaching background, I had the Rich Dad Poor Dad company. They had a seminar company, and they came to me about 10 years ago and they said, hey, we've heard about you. And, after the crash, before the crash, I was kind of just buying properties and putting them on MLS and just selling them, just your kind of typical fix and flip. And I got a call after the crash from a Singaporean, and they said, hey, we found you, and it looks like you own an Alpine Property Management in Indianapolis. And I said, yeah, that's correct. And they said, we see that you have one in Dallas. Yeah, you have one in Orlando. And we like those markets as investors. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm kind of an ignorant American, but how far away is Singapore? Like, I know it's Southeast Asia. And they're like, yeah, it's like a 30-hour travel day. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh my, like, whoa. And I said, and you want to buy rental properties in the Midwest? And they're like, yes. And I said, why? And they said, well, just rents, because if we buy a house in Indiana, we can make 10% on the rents. So if we spend $100,000, we can net $10,000. And you can't even buy anything in Singapore for $100,000. The cheapest property is $1 million, and you would only net like 2% off the rents. And so all Singaporeans go invest outside of our home country because you can't get good real estate investments here. And I'm like, it was amazing to me how ignorant Americans are. And, every one of us missed huge financial lessons in our home, like you mentioned earlier with our parents. And as a former high school teacher, I know for a fact that we spend way too much time on home ec and gym and not enough time on financial literacy. And so, we have college students getting degrees and 100,000 in debt, and they don't even understand what good debt and bad debt is. And they don't even have a path to pay those loans off in less than like 20 years. And so our retirement system, our education, our financial education system is broke. And so Rich Dad Poor Dad Company said, hey, we love what you're doing with international investors. Would you be willing to teach our students? And I'm like, yeah, but I just, that's something I would never charge for. I'd do it for free. And they said, okay, well, then you can sell them properties. And so but 2009, we did our first seminar. We let investors come to my biggest operation in Indianapolis. We held it at my office, and we had like 10 investors come out. And over 3 days, we took them out and we showed them properties in the field, and we let them meet the attorneys and the CPAs and learn how to think about investing in real estate. And we sold 5 properties, and it was a really cool thing. And since 2009, every month we do a free event. We live stream it now. So if you're interested in watching it, we'd love to let you watch it. We don't charge for it. And it's been a really cool thing because I just feel like a lot of people you don't have to convince people that real estate's an interesting investment. They just don't understand how to do it. So for example, we have a lot of people that we show how to buy a rental property inside your 401k, inside your IRA. A lot of people don't know you can do that. All rich people do that. And so we show them how to think about how to run the numbers, what cap rate is, what kinds of loan products are there, how does leverage fit into that? And so we really educate them over those 3 days. And if people want to buy properties for us, then we have properties available. And so we call it turnkey real estate investing. And to my knowledge, we currently are selling properties from 2 different markets in Missouri, 2 different markets in North Carolina, Indianapolis, Idaho, Dallas. So we're selling from 7 different markets, but we don't outsource any of it. So I buy the properties, I fix them up, I rent them out, we sell them to our clients, and then we manage them with our own companies on the back end. And so I know some of groups that are selling markets, properties from 1 or 2 markets, but that's really the unique thing about our company is that we don't charge for the education, and then we don't charge an additional markup on the properties. We're selling them at, with equity in them. We're selling them. They appraise for that number. And so it's been a really cool thing. We've been doing it for 15 years, and we have thousands of clients that have bought from us. And yeah, it's been a cool thing. I've met a few other groups that have done what we do, and then they get bought out by private equity. So every time I have a really legit competitor, some big private equity group comes in and buys them, and then they exit the market because they want them to buy for them. And I've rebuffed a couple different offers for our company because I like what I do, and I like coaching and I like teaching. It's ironic how I started on this path to teach. I still, I do several Zooms a week. I do podcasts like this. I do 3 days, 10 hours a day teaching every month. So isn't it funny how you always find a path back to your superpower? You always find a path to do what you love. I just make more money for it now,
Well, I think that speaks volumes too. It's that you haven't lost your core purpose, right? And I think that people just have to understand that while they might be teachers, like my family, my dad was a teacher, my brother is
Yeah.
a teacher down in North Carolina. So teaching was like the way of life.
Right.
But you don't have to necessarily be in the classroom to be a teacher. You don't have to, be in that same structure to be an educator. And I think, you could pretty much apply that to any sort of industry or position, is that you could still do whatever that position makes you passionate, but in a different format that allows you to live a more freeing life.
Yep. No, it's true. And it's funny. I still love every afternoon teaching high school kids because they do not care. And, we had our preseason meeting last Friday night where we set team goals and we, outline what we want to accomplish as a team and what we literally do a contract with each other for success. And man, those kids, if they disagree with something, they'll raise their hand and tell you that's stupid or whatever, whereas adults, we tend to be more polite, but the dichotomy of teaching adults for 3 days every month and teaching high school kids, they're the hardest audience in the world. When you can get through to a 15-year-old, you have mastered teaching, like, because there's no harder audience. But I love that, because if you can get in their head and get through to them, they will remember you forever, because we all remember that great teacher that we had. We all remember that amazing coach. And people don't remember what you did, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yep.
And that's, when we all think about our greatest teacher, our greatest coach, that person who made a difference in our life, it's how they made us feel. And that's part of Second Mountain as well.
I love that. I love that. That's great. Okay, let's dive into a different topic. So when you are out there talking to people and educating them on real estate, so I think you said a couple different things that I took note. You said um, people want to have money saved for retirement. They want to
Yeah.
pay less in taxes. And, you talked about how people can structure a 401k. How
Mhm.
how do you assess maybe what path or plan is best for each person? And how would you suggest our listeners maybe figure out what might be a good path for them?
So there's an asset allocation model called the Yale asset allocation model that was pioneered by the guy who like managed their endowment years ago. And it's 30 30 30 10, right? So it's 30% of your, and if you look at our top 1%ers and where they put their money, it follows it pretty closely. So it's like 30% in the stock market, 30% in private equity, 30% in real estate, 10% in cash. And I love that distribution. And as I meet investors, there's people listening that have two, three, four, six, five, $600,000 in retirement savings. And a lot, if you look at, there's about $36 trillion in retirement accounts. And about 30 trillion of that is managed by Fidelity, TD, Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
And those companies only allow you to put your retirement money in the market. And so, when the market crashed in 2008, your middle Americans making between 50 and 500,000, they all lost 40 to 60% of their retirement accounts. And some of you probably remember like this huge drop that you felt in your 401k, because you had 80 to 90% of your money in the market. And so one of the things that we teach investors, we're like, look, you should take a third of that it's been what, 2009, 15 years, 16 years since the last crash. And we've never gone that long without a crash. And so people have made a lot of money in their retirement accounts. And we're saying don't invest everything in real estate, but you should at least take a third of it and invest in real estate. And so that's our typical client, because a lot of people don't even know how to own property in a 401k. Not a loan against your 401k, not a withdrawal, literally putting your IRA or 401k on the title, and then the rents go to the trust account for the 401k. A lot of people don't understand self-directing. And so we teach them how to do that. We walk them through that, because our typical client, every month we're sending hundreds of thousands of dollars of rent on the properties we manage to trust accounts for self-directed IRA accounts, and that becomes the money that they live off. And so why is that interesting? Well, I'm guessing that if you're watching this and you're thinking, how much I live off of now and how much I need for retirement, those are two different numbers, right? Because maybe you live off of $8,000 a month right now, and there is no way that you're going to have a path to withdrawing $8,000 a month from that 401k, because maybe you only have $300,000 or $400,000 in there. And now when you look at median lifespans, it's reasonable to think that you could have a 20-year retirement, and you probably have 3 years worth of 401k savings. That's the typical client we make. And so one of the things we say is, well, if you were to buy 2 or 3, 4 properties in that account, then you're only spending the rent money. And so it could create like literally a pension of real estate inside that retirement account for you. So like my wife, for example, 8 years ago, she set up a SEP, a simplified employee pension. And the SEP allows her to contribute 20% of her income every year, up to about 60,000. So over the last 8 years, she's put almost $500,000 in contribution. She's very diligent about that. And but that account now, it's not worth 500,000 or 600. It's actually worth over $4 million. And so she's made it off the growth. And so she's looking at 20 years from now having $15-20 million in there, kicking off 75 to 100,000 a month. And people hear those numbers and like, that's insane. But it really isn't when you understand how all wealthy people allocate their money, how they structure their money, how they plan for retirement, how their wealth inherits to their kids. And so it's really goes back to that kind of gold-plated monopoly strategy that I mentioned earlier. And just setting up, I love that you mentioned tax. I mean, as a top 1%er, I pay about 8 to 9% a year effective tax on the income that I make. And it's because of cost segregation, and it's because of S Corps and C Corps, and because I'm a real estate professional. And there's all these strategies that rich people all use. And when we get together, we don't sit around and say, hey, do you pay your kids? Well, yeah, because all rich people pay their kids. And we don't sit around and say, like my son's at college, but two of my boys who are at college, my business pays them as employees and I 1099 them. So the money that goes to pay their college is a write-off to me. Whereas if I paid them out of my personal account, I'd have to pay a 40% haircut effectively to then send that money to them out of my personal account. And so learning this list of strategies, and that's really what we teach over our 3-day event, is what do all the things that wealthy do with their money? How do they invest in real estate? What kind of projects do they invest in? That's where people need to really kind of unlock and get caught up on the education side.
No, I love that. So let's play a game, and let's say that I have a retirement account that I've been contributing, and let's say it's, TIAA manages my money. All right.
Yeah.
So I can maybe say what allocations I want, and I can adjust those. I can maybe put up to, let's say, 5 or 8% in real estate, but those are REITs, right?
Right.
They're going to be, real estates that are giving me direct rent.
Right.
If I have, let's say, $400,000 in my TIA 401k, and I come to you and I say, look, I plan on retiring in the next 10 years. I know I'm not going to have enough money to live off of in 10 years. What would you do to help me in my retirement savings process?
So the first thing I ask is, because a lot of people don't realize this, but when you get hired at your job, when you sign all your HR paperwork and they set you up on the retirement plan, you sign an agreement that says that you can't take the money away while you work here. You can't self-direct it away. It has to stay with Fidelity, or it has to stay with TIAA, it has to stay with Vanguard, it has to stay with TD until you leave employment. And so that's the first thing I say is, do you have an IRA or a 401k from a previous job that you rolled in? Because maybe of the 400,000, 100,000 was from a previous job and you rolled it over when you got hired there. That 100,000 could then be self-directed. So literally for $175, in fact, when my clients come to the event, I give them 2 free self-directed IRAs. Some companies charge like $1,000 to set them up. We'll give them 2 free ones. But you could set it up for like $195, take the 100,000, roll it in, and then go buy property inside that retirement account. And then the retirement account goes on title, and every month I'll send the rents or whatever you invest in real estate. Those rents are tax-free. They're tax deferred. If it's a Roth, they're tax-free. If it's a traditional, then it's tax deferred. Let's say you flip it for $150,000 in a couple of years, you don't pay capital gains either. It's tax deferred or tax-free depending on the structure of the account. And so that's a lot of people don't realize that those rents grow. And so let's say you had a deal that you're making 8% on the rents, but if you're not paying taxes on the rental income like you would if it was outside the retirement account, you're literally making like 10% or 11%, depending on what your personal tax rate would be. And so that's the first thing I do. Now, let's say somebody's been at one job and they have $400,000 and they're 10 years away. Then I was literally talking to my brother-in-law who is in that situation. He's an attorney at a firm. And I said, he's my age, he's 50, 51. I said, just hit me up in 9 years. when you finally do get ready to retire, come spend 3 days with me and I'll help you decide. Because we have a whole range of different investments. So if let's say somebody's like, look, I just want to be very passive. Then we do what are called 506B syndications. And so like we have a brand new RV park here in Idaho that we developed. And so imagine you deciding to put 100,000 into that LLC with me. Let's say you come in for 10%, you own 10% of the LLC. It's not a fund, it's not a loan. So syndications are a really great way to passively invest in real estate because you're not dealing with landlord issues, you're not paying the taxes. The syndication group does that. And so we have syndications that we offer our clients, but then we have individual properties. And so there's pros and cons of each. And so, over 3 days, we map those out for investors so that Because I always say, you tell me how you want me to fit in your box for your money. How can we help you? Because we have, all these different products that we offer. And then we have people who say, well, I just want to learn to do it myself. Great. So what are the active strategies you love? Well, I like RV parks right now. I like manufactured home development. I like multifamily. I like foreclosure auctions. I like tax sales. Those are like my 5, hottest strategies for somebody who wants to do real estate themselves, in this market. But it's really mapping out, do you want to be active? Do you want to be passive? If you want to be passive, how passive do you want to be? And then mapping out a strategy. So I would rather raise your education level and get you more savvy. And then you say to me, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to work with you. Here's how I want to benefit from what you're doing.
Mhm. I think that a lot of people initially think they want to be very active in the real estate world
Totally.
because they see dollar signs, they see all the upside versus
Yeah.
they're not necessarily privy to all the work that goes into it and
Right.
the risks that are associated and all the what if and when your tenant trashes the place and
Yes.
you have a delinquency, you have
Yes.
evictions coming. And so I like the idea of educating people and having them make the choice because
Yeah.
I think that speaks volumes. You don't know what you don't know, and until they actually understand, what it means to be active versus passive, they may make a different decision.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I have a commercial building in Indianapolis that I bought years ago, and I have it rented like a 20-year lease, triple net.
Wow.
So my tenant pays the taxes, my tenant pays the insurance, my tenant pays the maintenance. I'm
Mhm.
just getting $1,500 a month. And my return is probably 6% a year, but it's the easiest 6% that I make.
Right.
The building is immaculately taken care of. The tenants will never want to leave. They want to buy it from me, and I'm, of course, am I going to sell it? So my return isn't sexy, but most people would rather have they don't realize that they'd rather have an easy 6% than, I have a trailer park that I bought that is in a war zone, and it's got like people cooking meth and puppy mills for pit bulls, and every stereotype of a trailer park exists in this park that I bought. And I'm
Wait,
making like 18%, a year on the rents.
can I
And
ask
no one would
a
trade those
question?
two investments with me. Like if you owned both, you'd be like, oh, yeah, I like the commercial building. It's
Oh
so
yeah.
much better,
Oh yeah.
And but people, it really highlights this issue. All money is always emotional because however you got your money came through emotion. So if I worked hard and I saved, okay, there's emotion associated with that. Or we got divorced and she got half, or we got divorced and he gave me half, and I was a stay-at-home mom. So there's anger from that money, there's guilt from that money. The biggest one is when they inherited their money,
Mhm.
right? Because they have this very complicated relationship. They're worried that they didn't know how to make it and that they can if they lose it, they'll never get it again. And so all money is always emotional, and people don't recognize emotion in their decisions because it's okay to say, I don't want to own a trailer park because it's scary, right? And I want to own a commercial building. And people want to say, well, I'm just by the spreadsheets. I'm just by the numbers. No, you're not. And I had a client recently, he came to our event, and he had come out as gay in his early 20s, and his mom disowned him. And he was estranged from his mom for 20 years.
Wow.
And she died, and he found out that she had left him everything. It was over $1 million. And he came to my event and he said, I got to invest this money. And he couldn't do it because he felt so much guilt about that. And, she estranged from him, but talk about complicated emotion,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
so you have to recognize that your money, because of the way that you got your money, is emotional. You're going to make decisions with emotion, and emotion needs to have a seat at the decision table as you invest. And you
Mhm.
need to say, because of this emotion that complicates how I got my money, I have to give it a vote. I think that's an important thing that people don't count enough. They're just like, just the spreadsheet, and that's not true.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your whole point on mindset and, really understanding that your past experiences are going to dictate future experiences. And so you have to get your mind right and you have to fully understand everything that's happening, your personal life, your business life, whatever. So I really, really like that.
Yeah.
I want to get into kind of asking you some more personal questions. So you told me you have 6 children, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have 6 children, 3 are out of the house, 3 are
Yeah.
still in the house. and you have this company plus how many other companies do you have plus your nonprofit?
Yeah, so I have over 110 LLCs. Um,
Lot.
but my rule of thumb on properties is $250,000. So if I have one property with worth over 250 or over 250,000 in equity, I'll put it in its own LLC. Anytime I start a new business, so we've been looking at Arkansas to set up another Alpine. And so if I go into Arkansas, which I like, I like Little Rock, I like Bentonville, where Walmart's headquartered. So if we decided to set up an Alpine property management there, then I would do a new LLC for, so each new business I do a new LLC, 250,000 I do a new LLC, any new partnership I do a new LLC. And so, I have one bookkeeper that all she does is my books, forward facing to every other partnership and every company that I own. And so it sounds like a lot. It's not really, it's just more of an asset protection strategy. Because, there's 400 people buying, selling, fixing up, renting properties that work with me, work for me. I call it people say, how many employees do you have? And some 1099s I count as employees because I call it the Christmas party litmus test. If they would be offended that I didn't invite them to the Christmas party, and over 95% of their revenue comes from me, they're my employee. Like, they're from a tax standpoint, they're probably a 1099 because they're a contractor, but that's kind of the limit. So our family, our tribe, there's 400 of us, and we're doing 100 million a year in real estate. We're buying 30 to 50 properties a month. We're selling 30 to 50 a month. We're managing 700 million in properties, and so it's a big operation. I'm a very debt adverse guy, and so on my Alpines and on my personal holds, I don't carry any debt. On the stuff that I'm buying, if I think I'll hold it for less than 24 months, I like debt. I like leverage. So I have about 20 million in debt that I keep for working capital on projects that we buy. But yeah, what's funny is it sounds really big now. It is big, but it's been a very, very linear kind of growth rate going back to when I started that first Alpine in January 2005 in Indianapolis. And we've never doubled our business in a year. We've never doubled the number of employees we've had. But I love the Tony Robbins quote that says, we always overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And it's really about setting habits. I'm like neurotic about my habits. I always wake up at 7 every day. I always go to the gym first. I always clear all my emails every hour. You start to set these habits that fuel your productivity. And so it's about, and vice versa. Those of you that are making a 5-figure income and you want to make a 6-figure, if you're making a 6-figure and you've never made $1 million, you probably have some Achilles heels habits that hold you back. Maybe you watch too much TV, maybe you drink too much in the evenings, maybe things that limit you. Maybe you do too much. You're doing your own books and you shouldn't be doing that. You do the work that an assistant should do because they're low value activities for you, and you need to focus more on high value activities. I feel like if I spend a couple hours with someone, I can usually figure out what those things are that are holding them back financially. I think once people really start to change their permanent habits, they can just really 10x almost every year what they're doing over time. It's people sometimes unrealistically want a 100x, and they got into bad habits for 20 years and they want to change it in a year. And usually it just doesn't happen that fast.
Yeah, I like to go back to the example of going to the gym. And it's like, if you want to get in shape, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be
Yeah.
something that you have to continually improve and work on. And I think the same goes for, any kind of business activity that you're doing, investing or, starting your own company.
Yep.
So I have a couple follow-up questions to that. So
Okay.
adverse to debt, which is great. And I think that, the debt crisis in our country is something that is really going to hit hard. And I read a statistic that said the Gen Zers are taking on more debt than any other generation. And, to your point against good debt, bad debt, it's a lot of credit card debt because they're not making the income that sustains the life that most people are living with inflation and with other, rising cost of rent and all these other factors. What impact do you think that's going to have on other people investing money? And,
Yeah.
or if I'm a Gen Zer, how can I break that habit and how
Yeah.
can I, not continue to stay in that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, those of you who are listening, if you are fortunate enough to have two, three, four, $500,000, there's never been a better time to be a landlord. I mean, if you look back as a student of history, if you look back to pre-Fannie Freddie, right? So go back to like pre-World War II and you look at home ownership in this country, only about 4 in 10 Americans owned a home. 60% of the nation were renters. Fannie Freddie changed that. And so through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, homeownership peaked in 2008 at just under 70%. And we're never going to hit that again. We'll never see that again. It's been trending the opposite direction, and they're projecting by 2030 we'll be back down to probably 50-50 homeownership. And so we're becoming a nation of renters. Part of it is debt. And we've never had more consumer debt. When you look at credit cards and student loans and automobiles, we've never, we're a nation of we know nothing about delayed gratification. We don't understand how to save. Very few people live off of, I always say the starting point of good is living off of 80% of what you make. I only live off of about 10% of what I make, right? And the rest I'm reinvesting every month. And most Americans are living off of 100% of what they make. And so they don't invest. There's a statistic I've tracked for the last 10 years. Starting in 2014, I came across this, and it said, they looked at 65-year-olds and they said, how many of them only have Social Security for their retirement? So $1,200 a month, right? In 2014, 1 in 5 of our 65-year-olds only had Social Security, but 60% of them, that Social Security was 90%. So they were only living off of like $2,000 a month, up to 60%. I was like, oh my God, that's so disturbing. Our boomers, because if you look at the parents of our boomers, well, they all had pensions, right? So then you look at our boomers, and I just checked that statistic a few months ago. It's jumped from 19% to 39%. 39% of our 65-year-olds in 2024 in 10 years are now Social Security has gone up a little. It's like $1,400-1,500 a month. But when you look at that from an inflation standpoint, it's less money because your Medicare comes out of that. And so we have this retirement crisis that our boomers will not be able to continue to own homes. And so they're going in 55 and older parks and becoming renters. Our Gen Zs, when you look at, home price appreciation and wage appreciation, it's never been less affordable to buy a home. And so to be in a position where you can be a rent taker, it's never been a better opportunity. And so that's why I'm such a big advocate of people catching up on being behind with their investing by learning to buy a few properties, maybe learning a strategy to make some money in real estate, go to tax sales, do a couple flips, some of those kinds of things, so that people can start making some more money. I see us becoming just a nation of renters again. And because I don't see anything changing in terms of wages, I don't see anything changing in terms of, properties and their accessibility to home ownership. And so, ironically, 25 years later, as someone positioned where I am, it's real hard for me to stop doing real estate deals because I've never made more money in so many different ways. And if you can just get on the top 10%, top 1% side, it's amazing. Like my brother, now that he's sold his business, he's making 20% a year on $500 million. Like he's a couple years away from $1 billion. And as I meet with him and his partners and the guys, the rich are getting so insanely rich in this country. You just have to understand the landscape. Is it fair? Absolutely not. Is our tax system fair? No. Are wages good? No, none of that's fair. It's funny because the boomers criticize their Gen Z and Gen X grandkids. Like, you guys are lazy. You don't work. And I'm like, no, actually, you lived in a better financial world. College tuition was more affordable. Your wages were higher. Your taxes were lower. And so, and you're still broke. There's still 40% of you have nothing. So no, boomers, you didn't get it right. But you have to understand that landscape, and it's not a level playing field because you have to learn to play the game. There is no absence from the money game in this country. If you don't learn to play the game, you're just getting played by the game. And that's you can't just sit up. There's no sitting on the sidelines. You're just getting played if you think that's what you're trying to do.
No, absolutely. And I think the same thing with the tax system. It's like you have to understand what the game is when you're trying to deal with the IRS and the complexities, and understand what they are telling you to do and what they are, giving you benefits for doing, aka investing in real estate, creating
Yeah.
businesses, creating jobs, things that the public asset class cannot do well, that the private sector is going to obviously do better. So couldn't have said it better. I would say one other addition to that, it's interesting. Boomers did not save, but their parents were the ones living through the Great Depression and, World War II. And they probably were the biggest penny pinchers that we had ever seen.
Yes.
I remember my grandparents, hiding money under the mattresses and,
Yep.
5 different safes in the house so that if a bank went under, they still had cash on hand and,
Yep.
all these little things. And I think we've kind of lost sight of the savings component, or at least how to save smart. And
Yeah.
it's not even that you have to save a lot. It's
Mm-mm.
if you're saving it and putting it in the right asset
Places.
or the
Yep.
right funds.
Yeah. Learning how to invest. Learning how to invest is so critical.
Absolutely. So I want to leave everybody with a little bit more information about your company. Tell me when your next 3-day event is, how people can figure out how to get involved with that, and if they want to buy a property and have you manage it for them passively, what do they have to do?
So I would just say for them to get in touch with you and have you introduce them to us. We will have in September, we'll have our 3-day here in Idaho. In October, we'll have in Idaho. You can go to alpinecapitalsolutions.com. We have our events listed on there as well. In November, we'll be back in Indianapolis. We don't do an event in December, but then we'll do 11 events next year. We also do a Monday Q&A call. I hop on every Monday to answer any question. I have about 400 people that join me every week where, people are always like, I want access to you. I want to be able to ask you questions. I want to pick your brain. So every Monday at noon Pacific, I get on. It's absolutely free. They can email you to get that as well. We have a website we built. It's our second mountain climbers community. So it's 2MC, the number 2MC mountainClimbers.aaronadams.com. And again, it's another free educational resource that I've put together so that people can get, I see companies charging thousands of dollars for mentorship and coaching. And so we just try to cut all of that out. If you'd like access to our 3-day live stream, because you don't want to hop on a plane and fly out, love to send that to you. I can send the recordings from the one we did a couple of weeks ago. I just have found that if I raise the IQ, the financial IQ of those around me, that they make my best clients. And so we try to give all of the education away for free. And then when you're in a position to buy property, then, as a couple of weeks ago, I had this 21-year-old at our event in Indianapolis, and he was sitting on the front row and he was taking meticulous notes. And I was kind of surprised because I usually don't see a 21-year-old. They're usually not in a position that they can invest passively. And so at the break, he came up to me and he said, I'm the son of one of your private equity partners. And I'm like, okay, your dad has $1 billion. And he's like, yeah. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I said to my dad, who can I learn about real estate investing? And he said, oh, you got to go to Aaron's event. So here I am. And I thought, man, what a Johnny Appleseed moment. Like I'm seeding this kid, knowing that he's going to probably inherit $1 billion. Like I'll have property demand from him for 50 years. But what a cool opportunity, because I don't ever try to qualify and I don't ever try to monetize everything that I teach. And I don't hold back. Well, I'm not gonna tell you my 5 secret strategies for active investing, but if you subscribe to my blog, then I'll sell that to you. That's not who I am, and that's not how we do business. So we're very casual, we're very informal. They can just reach out to you, and you can connect them with us, and we'd love to help them out.
Love that. Aaron, it's been a true pleasure having you on. I appreciate you and your time. And any final notes you want to leave our audience with?
I went to my first real estate seminar in 2000, and it was on tax planning. It was with a guy who had worked for IRS. And I've never stopped trying to educate myself. And so 25 years later, this year I'm learning how to do mixed use commercial developments. And so I'm actually doing a retail, residential, Starbucks, anchor store, and so every strategy that I've learned over 25 years is just like another tool on my tool belt, going to foreclosure auctions, tax sales, developing, buying apartments. And so I think if you'll plug into this idea that education isn't something that you do for 4 years, it's something that you need to build into your life for an hour or two every day, then I think that will really help move you forward. And so, I love this podcast. I love its initiative. I love what it's all about, because this should be part of that for you. And so appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate this opportunity to speak to you, to those that follow you, because it's definitely a shared value from that standpoint.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And I am a likewise opinion of education is something you should continue no matter how old you are. You should always be educating yourself. So, that being said, again, thank you, Erin. And that is it for this episode of Inspire Wealth. Take care, guys.